It is Monday, November 17th, 2025. It's 3:30, and we're here to interview a sheriff candidate. The BLCC will be doing the interviewing, and there'll be no public comments. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your background as a person and your background as a law enforcement officer.
My name is Chris Rice. My name is Robert Chris Rice, but I go by Chris.
Okay.
I'm from Shoshone County. I was born in Kellogg, went to high school in Wallace until 1988, moved to Coeur d'Alene. If you were here, you'd remember that the mines were all down and it was hard to get a job. My parents had to pack up and move to Coeur d'Alene. So I finished my high school in Coeur d'Alene, joined the Army, came back to Coeur d'Alene, didn't like Coeur d'Alene, moved back to the Valley. I worked at a lumber mill. Briefly, Chuck Reynolds, ironically, was the veterans liaison at Job Service. And so when I came back from the Army, Chuck said, "Come here, just call this number, they'll hire you." And it was the only call I made. And I worked at that company for about 4 or 5 years. Decided to leave lumber and go to college to be an attorney. My wife at the time was going to college to be an RN, and we had 3 kids. So after a year or two, decided I couldn't afford to keep pursuing being an attorney. Supported her getting her RN degree, and I switched over to get a degree in law enforcement. Joined the block with Tad Leach. I interned with Post Falls Police. After my internship, I talked to Larry Irvine, Kellogg PD. I was itching to get to work right away, even before I graduated. He hired me. He had asked me to sign a contract. I didn't sign a contract because they weren't going to have to pay for my post-education. I paid for it myself. In fact, 5 years ago, I finally paid it off. I got a degree, Associate's of Applied Science degree in law enforcement at NIC. Went to work for Larry about 6 months, maybe 9 months later. Chuck Reynolds had asked me if I was interested in going to the sheriff's office, and I was. I knew Mike Gunderson, who was my captain. I knew Mitch Alexander. I knew Chuck from when I got my job at the lumber mill. So I made that commitment and went to the sheriff's office, and lo and behold, Post Falls was knocking on my door about 2 years later saying, "You interned well with us. Would you like to come to work for us?" At the time, it paid more. It wasn't why I left. I really enjoyed being a sheriff deputy, but I was young and really into action. And Post Falls was a very rapidly growing city, and it was full of what I called action. There was a lot more SWAT call-outs. There was just motorcycle opportunity to be a motorcycle police officer, traffic investigator, you name it. And so I made the switch. And 2006, I decided to go private after giving 8 years to the Army and 8 years to the police department. I decided to go try to make some money in the private world. And I did. I started working at Dave Smith as a salesman for about 6 months and got promoted to a sales manager. Went from sales manager to finance manager, and then Ken had bought a store that was struggling in Spokane. It used to be Jeremco Nissan, and so out of the 275 of us, Ken chose me to go fix that store in Spokane, and I spent 3 years over there. That was 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5, 3 years. So when I was done with that job and made it successful, I packed up and did something completely different that didn't have anything to do with the car business or much. Moved to Bend, Oregon, and went to work for a company that does arbor trucks, forestry trucks, FedEx contractor, bread van, delivery vans. And that's still what I do today, only I don't have to live in Bend, Oregon to do it. COVID had actually done me a favor and didn't require me to live in Bend anymore, so I booked it back to the Valley, and I've been here since 2020 after leaving in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll start off with some questions. We'll start with Commissioner Cowles.
Why do you want to work for this department and community?
Well, I've always wanted to work for this department and community. The timing is right for me right now. I'm a 1099 employee, so is my wife. I got her into this business, and I can step back. She's now built her book of business over the last 5 years, and financially, it's possible for me to do it now. My kids all but one are grown up and out of the house, and so I don't have the financial responsibility of taking care of 6 kids and trying to make it on whatever civil positions pay. I identified with a lot of what I read about some of the issues or claimed issues there are with the Sheriff's Department. And I felt that my business experience at both Nissan and at Merritt Brothers Lumber Company and at Work Truck Direct, what I had to do to go into those companies, identify expenses, figure out how we could do more with less, trim the fats, so to speak, and stay on budget. And so, although I was a police officer before, and I got to do all the fun things like SWAT and motorcycles, and school resource was probably the best job I had. It was more about my business experience that interested me in doing this than it was my law enforcement experience. I don't feel like at 53 I'm going to go kick any doors in anymore or get in a tactical situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. What are your top 3 concerns about the department, and how will you deal with them?
My concerns have changed a lot. So when I went before the Democratic Committee, I read a lot of Facebook stuff and some press stuff, and I thought there was mismanagement there, which I'll tell you now, I don't. I got, in that 2-week period, I've talked to every chief in the Valley, cops in the Valley, deputies, even Under Sheriff Stutzky, and that's not a concern of mine anymore. What is a concern of mine is overtime, cost per day per prisoner, and overall culture. Not that there's a huge culture problem. There is some negativity that I think could go away real quick. And from my understanding, from what I've had access to, it's costing about $100 or a little bit more per person per day in the jail, and the stipend from the state is $75. So my biggest concern would be to find $25 per person per day, to not be making money, but to not be losing money. That would be number one. The other is I had an opportunity to meet Lori Osterberg, and she gave me access to the budget. Which I'm not used to in the private world. You don't get to look at the books until you're ready to stroke a check and buy the company. And so, I'm looking at patrol going back to 2023 budget after having an extra $400,000 in 24 and 25. What are the impacts of that going to be? I understand that the jail is causing a lot of overtime. We're having to pay the deputies overtime. So I think the second order of business is to really develop a recruitment plan quickly, get the jail staff, the overtime, private government, it doesn't matter. Overtime's a killer. When I worked at Post Falls, we weren't allowed overtime. We got comp. So if I had a DUI at 5:45 in the morning and I was off at 6 and I had to spend 2 extra hours on, I showed up for work 2 hours late the next day, worked a shorter shift. We found a lot of ways to streamline overtime. It's what we call a dead wage expense. It's just you're paying 1.5 times for one times the work. And there's some other things that popular as it may be in Post Falls, I'm not sure it would work here, but we implemented a traffic school. So in light of issuing, we'll call it $80 speeding citation, where the state gets $60 and the department gets $20, same amount for a traffic school summons. Sheriff's Department gets $60, the state gets $20. Money gets generated back into the Sheriff's Department, and it doesn't go on your insurance. It doesn't go on your record once you complete the course. It doesn't raise your insurance. As a traffic cop in Post Falls, that and a seatbelt ticket were the 2 easiest tickets I could ever write. It was an easy sell. Hey, you don't have to go to traffic school. You can pay your $80. Your insurance will go up, and you got 3 points on your record, or you can pay $80. Sit through a 3-hour PowerPoint, all goes away. We were able to generate a decent amount of revenue from that in Post Falls, which offset the cost of having motorcycles and all the other ancillary stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What do you think could be done or should be done to help retain our officers, given that we're a poorer county and we have limited resources and salaries have been very limited? What do you think about the issue of retention?
Well, I can only base it off of my own experiences, which were quite a few years ago. without getting in there, I mean, I've just met, well, it's not true. I met Lance when I left here 20 years ago and he was coming in, but I've only got to talk to him once. I've only got to talk to a couple people internally, but I know from my own experience, idle hands are the devil's work. And so when you're sitting out there doing nothing on a graveyard shift for 4 hours, typically what happens is 2 patrol cars will come up. They'll start complaining about administration. They get bored and they want to leave. They want to go to work in a place that's busier. I never left here because of the money. I left here because I wanted to be busier. And I can tell you when I went to Post Falls, I would finish one call. I wasn't dispatched by the radio. I had a computer in my car and I had 10 more calls I had to process out. And you just never could catch up. You don't get bored. Your morale's high because you're just hopping and hopping. So to answer your question with that, I would really have to dig in to find out how many calls for service we have, how many patrol deputies we have on patrol. Are there days where we're heavy? That being the case, do you want to keep your deputies busier so that they're more in tune with the job and more excited about it? Sitting in a patrol car for 4 hours during radio silence and just getting status checked every 15 minutes it's not fun. Not for me anyway. It might be for somebody else, but that would be, I would want to dive into that. Retention would be everything. It's always been a problem with Shoshone County. That's why they wanted me to sign contracts too. And the only reason I didn't, I would have signed a contract, but they didn't pay for my education. I paid for my own, and I didn't think I needed to be contracted because of that. When I went to Post Falls, there was a lot of times I thought, man, I wish I could go back to being a deputy in Shoshone because, there's times where you're a cowboy. You're going to a hot call in Murray and there's no backup. I remember being on a call on the top of Lookout Pass, holding somebody at gunpoint who had a gun at me. My cover unit's coming in a snowstorm from Bumblebee, 5 miles, up the Coeur d'Alene River Road. It's a long 45 minutes. So, it was interesting working here. It just wasn't as busy as what I wanted. And I even tested with LA, but my wife was absolutely not going to move our children down to LA. But that was how much action at that time I was looking for.
Okay.
How do you prioritize tasks in a high stress environment?
Well, prioritize them. High stress, I don't really have a high stress environment. I've had to answer to a lot of pretty important people, and I prioritize them based on necessity, how much time I have to perform each task, and what has priority. Pretty much triage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How would you address morale in the department?
How would I address it?
Yeah.
Be honest with you, I have to find out what the morale is actually like. As an outsider, unless you're in the door, you don't really know what kind of morale issues you have.
Okay.
I found out, I thought there was a huge morale issue, and the more I'm learning, it's not as bad as I hear it is, but there are some issues that should be addressed.
Okay.
And I looked at being a supervisor of a lot of people as being a coach. You got to get the mood up in order to perform well. In fact, sometimes I joked I was a psychiatrist, cheerleader, coach. Never was into titles, but that's basically what you have to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have a long-term plan? Like, is this something you just want to do for the next year, or are you interested in running for office again? What is your long-term?
Yeah, if I'm not selected today, I'll be running next year, and I'll be running 2 years after that, and then the 4 years after that, until I just don't want to do it anymore. I really feel fortunate I got to go out and do all the things in the private world I wanted to do, and like I said, my wife is doing very well. We know we're settling, we already settled down here. We bought a house 5 years ago, but we're building our forever home up Pine Creek right now. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Describe a time when you had to address poor performance or misconduct within your agency or employment. What steps did you take?
Well, no matter where I've worked, either in law enforcement or in the private world, counseling first, followed by written warning if counseling doesn't work, documentation all the way through until an outsider could look at what you've done to correct that behavior and say, well, obviously you've talked to them, you've written it down, they've signed it, you've coached them. Ultimately you have to either have to cut bait or correct the behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what are your greatest strengths as a law enforcement officer?
I would say work ethic. I like to drink a Zip Fizz in the morning, have coffee through the day, and get what I want to get done in the course of the day, not punch a time clock. So my strengths as a law enforcement officer were ticket with a smile, trying to keep the public, not to chastise you, but still enforce the law and make arrests when needed. My strengths as a supervisor have been work ethic. I need to get to certain levels of productivity throughout a day before I can think about tomorrow and coming back and doing it all over again. And I'm very organized when it comes to action plans, which I don't know if action plans is the right word, but identify a problem, figure out what the root of the problem is, 1, 2, or possibly 3 solutions for that problem, and then implement it.
Following up on that question a little bit with what you said, describe your leadership style and the approach that you would take over at the sheriff's office.
Well, my leadership style is, I think, the same as any leader. You want to keep order in your house. You want to increase productivity. You want to stop the bleeding as far as expenses, and you want to keep the morale high. I would have to lean on Lance Stutzky and his captains and everything else in order to find out, what is the issue? How do we address it? How do we keep the morale up? Why is the morale low in that situation? Again, I've only been looking at this for a couple of weeks, and I can't believe everything I read on Facebook. So that's been probably one of my best sources. I got to jump in there and figure it out on my own.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle conflict and disagreements within a team?
That's a very good question, because within a team, it makes me think of SWAT in the Army, which I would totally handle differently. A lot of times I handled that with humor. Depending in the role, like a sheriff, I would compare to being the top dog at a company or a corporation. You have to lean on your supervisors who are in direct charge, and you have to monitor how that behavior is or conflict is being resolved. And if there's going to be an upset party, there always is, what are you going to do to keep the morale up and address that situation? So, it all depends on the situation, I would say. When I was on SWAT, we just made fun of a lot of things whenever there was always conflict with one guy or another on. You just nothing but a bunch of type A alphas, man, handling some pretty hairy stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the Idaho Sheriff's Association, and would you use them for a resource?
I don't know enough about them to answer that. I have donated over the phone, and that's about the extent of my knowledge of the Idaho Sheriff's Association.
Well, they usually they'll bring out new legislation and training and everything for sheriffs across the state.
Oh, okay.
And most sheriffs join, and it's kind of like the Idaho IAC, Association of Counties. We go down there and we learn the new legislation, everything that year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd be all for that. I just don't know enough about it to answer that.
Okay.
Yet.
We have a lot of concerns from citizens about the lack of presence from the ISP and that. What would your relationship be with the ISP, and what would you like to see in the future with that?
Well, I can tell you my relationship with Paul Berger is quite well, so that would be the first thing I would address, is probably have a coffee with Paul and figure out what we can do to fix that. Paul and I worked well together when I was at Post Falls. I see him every now and then at the grocery store. We say hi, we BS. I don't think it would be an issue for Paul to extend us some resources.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on maintaining community trust and transparency?
Transparency is huge. My thoughts are, I like the Facebook page, don't like the comments. I think it's important to let people know what's going on out there. I think it would be even better to let them know publicly how their taxpayer money is being spent. There is criticism at I want to say it's the Boundary County or Spokane County right now, where there isn't transparency. They're not finding out what's going on, and not everybody reads the paper anymore. So I would be very transparent, unless it was contingent on an investigation, then obviously not. But.
Right.
Okay, I think that answered part of my question. As sheriff, will you patrol, and do you believe that it's important to engage with citizens, and how would you accomplish that?
Oh, absolutely. I'd patrol. Thought about it today on my way back from Home Depot, and there's a car on the side of the road, jacks out, and what I didn't realize is if it was an old lady in there or if it was some dude that might have more guns than I do, I don't know, and I drove right past him. As a sheriff deputy, sheriff, I wouldn't do that. I'd pull over, I'd help change the tire, I'd do traffic enforcement. I understand that the sheriff is the public eye of the sheriff's office, and I do feel like it's very, very important to be out there and have the public's ear, from one end of the county to the other.
Okay. You alluded to some of the challenges earlier in one of the other questions, so I just want to follow up on that answer. What in your view are the main issues facing our jail, and what would you like to see done?
Overtime is the main issue. That I would want to get that corrected right away. It looks like the budget didn't get cut for, and I'd have to look, but for the facility itself, it looked like patrol went back down to 2023 levels, but I didn't see that with the building or the jailers. So. The challenges will be, I'd like to see the jail get recertified. I know that when I worked here before, we made money housing prisoners. We didn't lose money. And there's really no profit generation in law enforcement. There's tax that gets paid in December and goes to budget in January, and then there's tax that gets paid in June. And, with getting recertified, making the jail profitable, as I mentioned, a traffic school, other items to generate profit, not to make it a commercial money factory, but to keep it above line and not be losing money. Those are all issues I would like to address.
Okay.
I've even talked with Lance about the jail. Everybody I talked to has told me how much Lance knows about the jail. So I would be leaning heavily. I didn't work the jail as a cop. I'll be leaning heavily on Lance for that.
Okay.
What is your vision for serving our community?
No, my vision is community policing, being out, being aware. I know there's a lot of complaints about how much time is being spent on the interstate. I do remember from when I worked up here that unless you were going to a hot call, you didn't get on the interstate, Silver Valley Road, one end of the valley to the other. It brings more awareness. There's more cars being seen. There's more people out of their cars changing tires. All of that matters. That's exactly what I want to see as a taxpayer, and I think that that's what the majority of taxpayers want to see. It doesn't matter if you're the sheriff or the newest patrol deputy. We should all be out there doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. I've had numerous people from Calder, Clarkia, and Avery tell me that they're being underserved. How would you change that?
That's a tough one. I don't know. We're a huge county, and we have a lot of resources spread out all over the place. We had one St. Joe deputy when I was here, and he got called up in the middle of the night. Sheriff didn't hold him to a particular schedule. It was more of, please be available for me when I need you. And I would be looking at that approach. Don't want to be paying overtime, but do I need a deputy to put in an 8-hour shift only for me to call him 4 hours later to go out and handle a domestic? Probably not. Make sure that we're getting the 40 hours a week in, but be a little bit creative in how we're using those 40 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to possess many skill sets. Which of your personal traits and skill sets do you think would best help you be a successful sheriff?
I think my experience and traits in business. I never was afforded an opportunity to be handed a business that was flourishing and make a bunch of money, I had to take over that, what we would call a dumpster fire, and turn that aircraft carrier around in a bathtub and start making money. So that is the challenge that I enjoyed the most. That's most likely the biggest reason that I went out for sheriff in the last couple of weeks. And it's what I know I'll be the best at as far as my traits will be that very thing of finding how to do more with less.
Okay. How do you feel about being an active sheriff, and describe what you consider being active?
Well, an active sheriff, the community policing aspect, the meetings, the Chamber of Commerce, the Kellogg City Council, you name it. You got to make all of those appearances. You got to be out in the community. And my post intermediate is expired, so I would have to become repost certified to be out on patrol. I have no problem doing that. I never went to the post academy. I challenged the test and beat it, and that was good enough for Post Falls, who thought that boot camp was well enough in line with the police academy, and that as long as I was post certified, I was fine. I don't see being post certified being an issue whatsoever. I mean, I have no problem with patrol, community policing, the meetings, the public appearances, the banquets, you name it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's been said that the sheriff's office is the last line of defense when it comes to the people's constitutional rights. Would you enforce a law that you felt violated the citizens' rights?
Would I enforce a law that violated the citizens' rights?
That you felt that violated the citizens' right? You know, we've had this issue with COVID, the masks, mandates, and things like that. That's
Law is pretty black and white for me, but the Constitution holds a higher bar. So if I felt like somebody's constitutional rights were being violated, there's a different way to handle that than a physical arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I would want to pawn it off on anybody else, but I think that's for him and the plaintiff and the defendant to resolve legally, not for me to resolve. But to answer your question, no. If I had to make the decision of making a physical arrest and I question both the law and their constitutional rights, I could make that call to where it doesn't have to be a physical, especially if there's no violence or victim.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about through my questions, so if anybody else have one, holler.
So
No, I think I'm about through mine.
I'm not done.
Okay. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
How would you improve coordination and communication with other law enforcement agencies and local government?
That's, I think, would be very easy for me. I cut my teeth into law enforcement with Paul Twite and Jason Woody. I worked with Richter. The chiefs, I get along with all of them. From what I'm told by the chiefs right now, it's some of the best it's ever been as far as coordination and in agreement between at least the administrators. I don't know much about the patrol officers. You know, there's
And outside agencies like Kootenai County Sheriff's Department, Benawa.
oh yeah, that'd be,
kind of reach out to those other sheriff's
Absolutely.
departments, ISP.
absolutely. Same with Paul Berger. Same with the chiefs. I have a lot of contacts at a lot of different agencies throughout the 5 northern counties and Spokane County as well.
Okay.
Or is it still? Do you have?
No, I don't have any more.
I have one more.
Okay.
What would your first 90 days as sheriff look like?
6 days a week, 12 hours a day until we get the spending and the overtime resolved. It would definitely a recruiting campaign of some sort. Got to get the jail staffed. Absolutely have to do that. So it would be the same as every other business that I've had to dive into. A lot of time away from home initially until you can get to your levels of what you think are successful, and then back off to your 50-hour, 60-hour, whatever you want to do. But I have no problem working as hard as I need to, especially in the first 90, I would say in the first 180 days, to get it on track to where I'm comfortable with it. And that would also allow me to, no offense, Lance, it would also allow me to assess the captains and the undersheriff to know that if I'm not there, everything will be handled the way I would want it handled as well. So that's what it would look like. A lot of time spent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just one question from my perspective. The Board of County Commissioners ultimately selects you for this position. What would your transition timeline be for coming into office? Would you need days? Would you need weeks? Would you need months? Ideally, what would it look like for you?
I'm 1099. So the only gamble I've made on all of this, my company's out of Bend, Oregon, so the press, my name in it, my employer has no idea right now that I've been pursuing sheriff. It would only take 24 hours for me to have a conversation with him and back off. My book of business stays with me. I'm not a W-4 employee, so all of my data stays with me. It's a 4-year, 6-year, 12-year pause until I want to jump, if I want to ever jump back into that. It's a very easy transition.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nothing further? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
you.
it.
Thank
We're
you.
adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate